Hi, and welcome to Progressive Podcast Australia. I'm Nick, and I'm joined by a favourite comedian of mine for a long time, and I'd say now a regular guest on the show, Myq Kaplan, who has just performed, or it's upcoming, the Special Rini about his girlfriend Rini, co-written with his girlfriend Rini. And yeah, thanks for joining us, Mike, after your performance at the Riyadh Comedy Festival.
Starts with re as well. Thank you so much for having me back. Happy to be here as regularly as possible.
I just thought the rehab it's getting a little bit less topical, but my YouTube algorithm was flooded with takes on that festival. I imagine probably yours maybe even more so. I don't know. We have spoken a lot, I guess, as a politics or at least political show. We've spoken quite a lot with you about, I guess, the politics of comedy. I don't know if you had any thoughts on the Riyadh thing, or whether you kind of just stayed out of those discussions,
Yeah, I
or
mean,
want to
I
continue to stay out of them. That's fine as well. But yeah.
Oh no, I since you asked, I'm now legally required to answer. I won't go on for too long about it, but it's the kind of thing that I was like, I'm not happy that there's so many things like I'm not happy it happened, but I once it happened, I was happy to see the multitude of takes that I agree with. There were, I think a lot of people said a lot of, meaningful, reasonable things. I think the first, reasonable critique is that the government of Saudi Arabia is trying to, I don't know, whatever the equivalent of whitewashing, of kind washing, their image by getting popular comedians from the States or perhaps around the world as well. I feel like the first, pushback against hey, why not? Don't the people of Saudi Arabia deserve comedy as well? And yes, of course. And they don't necessarily the fact that the government is putting it on. I think I saw Jay Jordan is one of my favorite newer comedians, and a friend who I saw maybe it was on his podcast appearance on Good One, the Jesse David Fox comedy podcast. That's excellent. Talking about how I think he was the one, I'm sure maybe not the only one, to point out that it's not just, like somebody. All right. There's so many. It's so hard to. I'm really impressed when people can compile all the information into the take, because one response when people are like, why shouldn't we go to Saudi Arabia to do comedy? So their government causes harm. Doesn't our American government also cause harm? And if that is so, then what, isn't it bad to also perform in America? And I feel like it was Jay's response to be like, but yeah, you're not performing for being hired by the very authoritarian, harmful regime. It's not the same as performing in America. It would be equivalent to, performing at Mar-a-Lago, or for Jared Kushner, or for any of the Trump royal family. And because the royal family was who was, sponsoring, putting on, paying for the comedy festival event over there, and the same royal family connected to the specific murder of journalists. Maybe more than one. Who knows? There's certainly one that was pretty salient in the news. And so, yeah, I think, and of course, when a back and forth, a he said often of this happens, they'll be like, well, you're just jealous that you weren't invited. I think Ranan Hirschberg is a comedian friend of mine who had a really funny joke long ago, where he would say, I would never go on Joe Rogan's podcast unless I was invited. And so, I mean, truly, there are many. I'm very impressed and appreciative of the comedians who, like Atsuko Okatsuka, who was invited and turned it down. Of anyone who was invited, who did turn it down, I feel like they have the greatest leverage in say, because true, like I wasn't invited, so I can say anything and be like, yeah, I wouldn't take that blood money that they didn't offer me, right? But there were people who were offered. I mean, even I think it's really interesting that Tim Dillon and Jim Jeffries were both invited, agreed to go, and then said something like Tim Dillon on his podcast said something like, yeah, I mean, we're basically being paid money to look away from the horrors that they're committing, and I'll do it. And then they were like, no, that's not, we want you to do more than that. We want you to not even mention the horrors that we're talking about. I mean, is the take that I saw, because he said that and then he was disinvited, and Jim Jeffries maybe a similar thing. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly, we're talking in November of 2025, and I think the festival happened like late September into like the first maybe week or two of October. And yeah, absolutely, for like the month or couple months leading up to it, there was a lot of coverage, and then while it was happening, a lot of coverage, and then I also am appreciative that Jessica Curson was, a person who did agree to go, and in part, and sort of posted things about being, a Jewish lesbian going to, a part of the world where people, she might, who knows how safe she felt, but she was like reported on some people who were in her audiences who were like, this is important for us to see, but then also afterwards she was like, I'm sorry everybody, and I'm donating all of the whatever hundreds of thousands of dollars that I was given to a human rights organization, because that would be better. So I feel like that's it. Of the ways that you can do it, one great way, turn it down. Another great way, go and then donate the money, and then followed by not getting invited and not going, and then at the last, I guess getting invited and saying something true about it, and then getting disinvited. Anyway, and then then Bill Burr, but yeah, it was absolute. I mean, it's so interesting because obviously, I don't know. I'm inside comedy, so I don't know how much the news of comedy things like permeates outside the comedy ecosystem that I'm a part of. Like, I bet my mom doesn't know that there was a Riyadh Comedy Festival, or maybe if it made the mainstream newspaper, news source that she gets, maybe she would have seen something that Dave Chappelle said, or Kevin Hart, or, one of the most famous people. But yeah, so I don't know. I'm sure it rose outside, the comedy ecosystem a little bit, but not to everyone. But yeah, but for me and my feed, my algorithm was feeding it to me for quite a while.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you've hit it on the head there. I feel like a lot of the comedians were like, well, we want to perform for different people, even if the government, they don't agree with their government necessarily. We don't agree with their government, but we still got to perform. But yeah, it is different when it's actually for that government. I do think though sometimes that I guess I'm seeing things more from like progressive social movements, but also how that intersects with comedy. But sometimes we kind of look at things in a black and white way. So the good comedians didn't perform at Riyadh and the bad ones did. But I think like some comedians who like said no may be doing other things that are less good, and those who like did perform might be doing other good things. I also feel like this kind of feeds into, I think, discussions around maybe not quite cancel culture, maybe call out culture, I guess. But this is actually from one of your Art Nuggets emails from Rebecca, a fan of yours, who said, too much we take the good for granted and don't acknowledge it, and then only take action when there is critique. So I do think there is something to be said of not only criticizing a comedian when they perform at the Riyadh Comedy Festival, but also like saying, I really enjoyed your special, and I really enjoyed your special, Myq. But yeah,
Oh, what a segue. I appreciate sincerely. Oh yes, of course. I mean, I think that humans have, we've evolved to have this negativity bias because, on the most rudimentary level, if we had to note things, one at a time and couldn't recognize patterns and categorize, then like everyone would be like, oh, okay, my friend got eaten by that saber-toothed tiger, but what about that saber-toothed tiger? So we developed, because, and we don't develop a positivity bias because, if your friend eats something that's healthy and you don't eat that thing, you can still be alive if you eat other things. But if you avoid one big negative thing, then you might not be alive to, eat good healthy things or avoid other, even less harmful negative things. So yeah, I think that I don't know if it's a direct one-to-one, correspondence to that's why, like the news, there's more news that is about harmful things than news about positive things. But yeah, I read also that there's a statistic that people share. If something bad happens to you, you share it with 9 people. If something good happens to you, you share it with 4 people. And I'm trying to up the 4. You know what I mean? So, so the point is, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for watching the special, and I'm glad you liked it.
Yeah, and I did want to maybe say, I guess one thing, I feel like it's kind of related to your special, but also kind of that broader sort of politics and comedy thing. One thing which I was thinking about, like with your comedy, yeah, I think of like other comedians I like as well. Like I think like James Acaster would be another one as well, who has like some political material, some which is just kind of fun and silly and funny, and like it's like yeah, the comedy is like not always punching up, but never punching down. I think that is really important. I guess thinking about what other comedians are doing, and I know you don't like to focus on that too much, but I guess I'm thinking you perform at so many different venues with so many different comedians, and some who are aligned, and some who are not so much. And so I guess I'm wondering, I think you've said before, maybe on a podcast or something, when you're thinking about others being criticized, you think about how that applies to you. Like rather than saying that comedian is sexist, you might think, well, am I being sexist? How can I make my material not sexist? So I think it's a good attitude. I'm just wondering, say you're at a comedy club, for example, and the comedian before you is saying things which are, you find objectionable, racist, sexist, homophobic, whatever. Like, how would you address that? Would you just make a mental note, don't invite this person on my podcast? Or like, what would be like, I'm sure that's happened to you. I was just wondering about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would say, I mean, sometimes depending on the circumstances, like if my hope would be that if this, in this theoretical circumstance, the comedian who is saying, stereotypical, harmful, bigoted things like that, I hope that the audience is not into them, if it's like it's not a Klan rally that I've somehow accidentally managed to book myself on. So in that situation, like, let's say it's even like, maybe the audience is laughing, but I don't think that the audience is, necessarily buying into and like agreeing like whole cloth with those, the attitudes expressed in the jokes, because like sometimes, there's sometimes I never think it's so that like, it's just a joke, like, because even every joke that you're telling means like it means something, even if it just means like, this is what I think is good to say right now compared to any other thing. But I know that there are people who, like, let's say, aren't hoping that people suffer when they're making, but they're like, I could tell a joke that involves a stereotype about this group of people. Like, I don't intend them harm. I think maybe they could be in on the joke too, like people like being roasted. But so I would often, if I could, in the time, between when I hear a comedian go on before me, say things that I might not agree with, like the message of, if I have material or could construct material, a riff or something to kind of, mention, address the elephant in the room, if it is, however elephantine or elephantile it is, if I could do that, like, even I feel like a simple way could be even like, let's say this comedian is like clearly very different than me. I might go up and say something like, well, they took my act, something to let people know that obviously I don't, I'm not in the same place that they are, or I might sometimes I've gone up and be like, and now for a counterpoint, and even just saying that, even if I don't have a specific, like point by point, deconstruction of them, sometimes like I feel like there have been times when, like let's say I am like a more experienced, like higher status comedian on the show. Like sometimes, I ran an open mic in Boston for many years, and like sometimes people would come on and say any number of horrifying things, and in that situation, I would definitely go up and be like, no, like I mean, not if the comedy was bad. Like so much comedy, when you're just starting out, you're not skilled, like you haven't figured out what to do or how to do it, and sometimes that comes out in quote unquote shocking way, like shock comedy ways. But if it really seemed like there was a message to the jokes that I like didn't agree with and thought was harmful, then I would absolutely say something. And then yes, of course, to your specific question, yeah, I would be like, maybe I won't have that person on my podcast for sure. Though, I certainly have had people on my podcast who I, don't agree with 100% about everything. And I don't know if you follow, there's a comedy journalist named, I believe it's Seth Simons. And
No,
do you know this man?
I don't know.
Uh,
No, no.
he does some real interesting, like he has a newsletter that I subscribe to, and he basically all the comedians who went to Riyadh, like he listens to their podcasts and he like transcribes some of them. So like one on October 15th, I'm looking back through my records, the headline was Riyadh Comedy Festival headliners agree. It was fine to headline the Riyadh Comedy Festival. And then like shares that Andrew Schultz just released a new episode of his podcast where they talk about it, and he's done like podcast transcripts of like Shane Gillis's podcast and Tim Dillon's and various other people in sort of like the alt-right leaning comedy bro verse. One really interesting one that I like a lot. He has one called The Stavros Problem. Do you know the comedian Stavros?
Don't
Who
think I do.
yeah, well, he's got a Netflix special. He is
Yeah.
he's doing well in comedy, and I'll just share a little bit from uh he starts this piece off by saying, my friend Michael, for whom I have great respect and esteem, is a huge fan of the comedian Stavros Halkias. He often encourages me to consume this or that new piece of media by him, and when I say no, thank you, it's not for me, he asks why. Halkias is, after all, a very funny left-winger who makes no secret about his politics, contrary as they are to so many in his class of stand-up podcasters. Like, he's used his considerable platform to support Zoran Mamdani's mayoral bid. He earned glowing headlines for his firm response to transphobic comments by the comedian Jordan Jensen on his podcast. He positions himself as a woke dirtbag, and in almost every aspect of his public life, he appears to live up to that positioning. What then is my problem? And then he shares a transcript with Stavros talking on the podcast I mentioned, Good One, and he talks basically about how he is still like friends or friendly with people whose views that he, doesn't agree with. And Seth Simon's point is that he thinks that if you're, when you get far to the point where you're, hanging out with Nazis or Holocaust deniers, and these things are a spectrum. Clearly, like it isn't to say that Joe Rogan, Theo Vaughn, Shane Gillis, and etc. They're certainly not Nazis in the classic sense, or maybe any sense. But then he like really, it's so interesting like that there are he maybe some of these comedians like I think are like doing their equivalent of just joking, and they're saying things that are they don't mean to be. They don't, like, I'm not homophobic, I'm not transphobic, I'm not racist, I'm just making jokes that this homophobic, transphobic, racist character that I play on my podcast for money say and think. So I think that like I also am not like it's not, there's no, it is not, very few things are black and white, because we live in a world, in a society, in these, flawed human bodies and consciousnesses where we're all trying to do our best, and we're all, like as I am a vegan and I am doing my best to, not harm animals, in my diet or the way that I live my life. And also, it is impossible to live one's life without, causing some harm accidentally some of the time. And like the thing that I care about the most might not be what somebody else cares about. And somebody else might be much better at, knowing about recycling than I, or, various, like I certainly fly more than some people do, or drive more to get to my gigs, and like the carbon footprints therein and the, effect on climate change are certainly, there are people who like never drink out of a plastic water bottle. And I have a non-plastic water bottle that I bring most places, but every once in a while, if I didn't, then please, like I let it be known that I have drunk out of plastic water bottles. I do my best not to.
So you don't have to dig through the online photos of you to catch you with the plastic water
Yeah.
bottle. You've come out
Here it
ahead of
is.
it. Yeah.
Yes, I will not say that I have never used a plastic water bottle. I do my best, and everyone is in their way doing their best. But yeah, I think the it's such an interesting question of like how much do you or don't you engage? Because like here's like a weird analogy that is the one that popped into my head. Like there was a rumor about Morgan Freeman dating his granddaughter. Is that anything that you ever heard about?
No, I know there was a fake Morgan Freeman Twitter which was very popular at one point. Like, but yeah, maybe that's unrelated. But yeah.
Interesting. So there's, if you say, I just did a brief search for Morgan Freeman granddaughter, and the first thing that comes up in Google is Morgan Freeman accused of relationship with relative. And then, so there was somebody, and it's his step granddaughter. And I think that for a while, there's unsubstantiated rumors of an affair between the 80-year-old Morgan Freeman and this 33-year-old. These rumors have circulated in the tabloids for several years and were strongly denied by both of them. And I feel like for a while he just didn't respond at all because he's like, I'm not going to dignify this with a response. And then eventually, when there was like a preponderance of these rumors, at a certain point, it's like, I guess I have to say that I've never had a relationship with my step granddaughter. And it's weird to have to say that, but you know what I mean? Like, it's sort of like the old, I don't know, is this familiar to you? In the United States, there's like, it's illegal for a lawyer to say to like a witness on the stand, tell me, do you still beat your wife? Because, and that used to be legal, but there's no way to answer that question. Like, the question is prejudicial in its form. Like, if you've never beaten your wife, you say the truth to that answer is, I mean, no, and I never, but like, just answer the question. Like, do you still beat your, like, it's no, but then you have somehow tacitly, agreed to the premise. And so, but obviously the legal system is not perfect, but it's better than the system by which, tabloids operate, where, I wonder if he ever sued them or what, how things are phrased or alleged or what have you. But it's such an interesting thing. I feel like, even when you brought up the Riyadh Comedy Festival and you said, maybe, it's a little bit in the past, but, we hadn't talked since then. It's been quite a while. And so it's like recent for our podcast relationship.
It is recent for our podcast. We generally do podcast very infrequently. So it's like, hey, here's this thing that happened 6 months ago. This is topical for us, for our podcast.
Exactly. And so the amount of like, it's so, have we ever talked about, do you know George Saunders, the author?
No, I'm not contributing or knowing much today, but no, I don't.
Oh, you're fine. George Saunders, a wonderful author of short stories, novels, and nonfiction. And the first book of his that I read was a nonfiction essay collection called The Brain Dead Megaphone. And
Okay.
the title story, The Brain Dead Megaphone, was, and I'm glad to be talking about George Saunders because I love him. His work is like really thought provoking and kind and really interesting. Like he's won the MacArthur Genius Grant. He's like a really I feel like a really kind-hearted genius and a really creative, thoughtful person. And so the Brain Dead Megaphone, the the context is he's like, imagine you're at a party, and this is a paraphrase, like read the story, but he's like, imagine you're at a party and you're chatting with some friends, and there's like a lot of people sort of around the room, in different small groups of people, and like in the middle of the room, there's a group that starts to get louder than everyone else, and so everyone around them, all orbiting the party, can hear what they're talking about because they're doing it loudly, and the thing that they're loudly talking about is like uninteresting to you, but let's say it's about reality TV, like they're talking about the Kardashians or what have you, and they're talking about it, and you're like, oh man, can you believe that they're talking about this, unimportant thing, this boring thing, this thing that doesn't matter as much as what we were talking about, and then all of a sudden, you are infected, like every group that can hear that larger group, just starts kind of talking, doing, commentary about what that is. And then everyone in the party is talking about what the loudest people in the party is talking about. And that's the brain dead megaphone. And he's like, and he says that George Saunders says that's the media, basically, or the mainstream media. Like some story happens, like the Riyadh Comedy Festival, and there could be like some, as objectively as possible, like newsworthiness to it. But then, other outlets pick it up because like, oh, people are talking about it. We want clicks. We want subscribers. We want to get on the action. Like here's another, my girlfriend, Rini, as you may know from the special of the Rinis. Rini has a good friend, a comedian named Ashley Bez, who went viral a couple weeks ago because she went to a wedding and she had asked her boyfriend what's the dress code, and her boyfriend, who had been invited and had the invitation, he said to her, just wear something nice. And so she wore a cute outfit that was like a kind of unorthodox, like it was, a dress, but had different layers. It was a little asymmetrical. She had something with her feet such that she couldn't wear heels, so she was wearing Doc Martens, I think. And she then comes to find out, she posts a video from the wedding, and she's like, I'm hiding in another room that's not the main room of the wedding because it's a black tie wedding. So, and she's like, almost all of the women are wearing floor-length black gowns, and I'm wearing this sparkly, cute thing that my mom made me that I like a lot, but I understand it's now like not the dress code, and I'm mortified, so I'm hiding so that I don't ruin their photos. Anyway, millions of people watched this video on TikTok, on Instagram. Thousands of people responded. Rini is planning on potentially doing like if not a TED Talk, like the equivalent of an analysis of the various things that people are saying in response, which are, the majority of the comments are unkind, like, kind of
Okay.
piling on to like that saying that she has done the wrong thing, that she is bad. Like, thankfully, eventually, the bride of the wedding made her own video that was like, it's cool. And even then, people are like, no, it's not and I say this all to say, like, it went, it was viral on those sites, and then it got picked up by like news sites, like People Magazine, and they just like, here's what happened, and then comments on there. Rini has become like a student of this, realm of the internet as it pertains to, like sexism and patriarchy and, obviously double standards as far as like if this was a man who accidentally wore the wrong thing or wore a thing that would have been totally fine in a lot of situations, but in this one limited circumstance where people have strong opinions, and so it's so interesting that, obviously, like, the internet works like that, where if something gets to the front page of Reddit, then sometimes people are like, oh, well, let me see what's on the front page of Reddit. And it, shoots those numbers skyrocketing, because like, wow, I wonder what the people are looking at. I wonder what the people are watching. I'll look. And then you keep adding to that wall of sound, that massive noise, when, I feel like, yeah, obviously, like the best comedians, the best artists, the best journalists, the best, societal commentators are ones who don't only, like, I mean, obviously, like we talk about the Riyadh Comedy Festival. Like you're a good comedy podcast progressive journalist, and I'm a good comedian artist, and also I feel like obviously you can, some of the greatest artists do talk about what everyone's talking about, but in different ways with different perspectives. And then some are also like being like, but what about over here? Like in a world where everyone's zigging, I'm gonna zog. Some people zag, but I'm gonna zoog. I'm not even gonna use the word that already exists. So yeah, I really, and so the way that you seamlessly use the Riyadh Comedy Festival to counter position yourself to be talking about how wonderful my special is, which I have done now as well, is admirable, impressive. You're a brilliant journalist.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I don't consider myself a journalist, so to be a brilliant journalist is even better.
Oh
But
yeah,
I
even
do want
better.
to zoog to your special, which
Yes.
we'll kind of zoog more directly into it. I guess you mentioned Rini. I wanted to. I guess I'm interested. Obviously, there's a lot of material about my wife kind of thing. Like I'm thinking of like old, bad, very stereotypical comedy, which this is definitely not. But yeah, I guess I'm curious about. Yeah, it's about Rini, but also co-written by Rini. I guess my two questions are like, how did that come about? But also, is there precedent for that? Have you heard of that happening before? Like, I haven't, but I'm much less in the world. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, great question. And I'll say short answer, no, this has never been done before. This is innovative and unlike anything that's ever been. I will say, with sincerity, there's certainly not a lot of comedians who are partnered with their partner, their romantic partner as a creative partner. I think one major example is Jim Gaffigan, who, his wife Jeannie Gaffigan also writes with him and he performs. So I feel like structurally speaking, that is, there is precedent for that. And there's numerous like comedy couples out there. Like I was just in LA and I saw my friends Julia Razi and Will Miles are a married couple. They're both comedians individually, and also I know they have worked on projects together, and so that definitely can happen. I don't know, like sincerely, specifically, like it's so funny. When I was starting out in comedy, there was a female Muslim stand-up comic named Tisa Hami, who was started out a little bit after me in Boston, and for a little while, like she was certainly the only female Muslim stand-up comic that I knew. And I mean, I didn't know as many comics, like the social media world was not as large. And I remember like some years after that, there was another like a successful female Muslim stand-up comic whose name I don't remember, but she was billing herself as the world's only female Muslim stand-up comic. And my friend was like, that's not true. And then obviously now wonderful that we're at a point where I don't think anyone could write. It would be very difficult to claim to be the only almost anything in stand up, because there's like such a preponderance of stand up comedians of all different, backgrounds and faiths and genders and the like. So this is all to say, to part of your answer, I don't know how well, but there's certainly not a lot of precedent for it. Ali Wong does a special while she's pregnant, and then also so did Kira Sultanovich eventually, and so did there's like a number. I can't even remember all of the comedians who have recorded a special while pregnant now. It's such a regular thing to do now that at least a handful of people have done it. Not me, but. But Rini and I we did carry this comedy special to for its whole gestation period, just with a J, of course. And the way that it came about, to answer your sincere question sincerely, is I lately, so I would say when I started doing comedy, more than 20 years ago, I mostly was just kind of throwing a lot of ideas at the wall to see what stuck. I'm like, this could be funny, this could be funny, this. Some of the things were important to me, like, could have been about my life and relationships, could have been about social justice issues I care about animal rights, about veganism, about, anti-homophobia, anti-racism, anti-sexism, anti-transphobia, that sort of thing. But some of the jokes would just end up being about movies I like, or words that sound like other words, or absurdity on some level, just joy for joy's sake, as opposed to a specific message. And like over the past several decades, I feel like little by little I learned that I can steer the ship in the direction I want it to go. I don't have to just be beholden to whatever people are laughing at. I'm like, oh, I can make audiences laugh at what I want them to laugh at. If I want to talk about, this relationship, or, like I have an hour in the works about my grandmother who died a few years ago, and the things that she said and did that were funny, and what that relationship means to me. And my mom, some stuff with my mom is in there, and then also my dad. And then, I have other hours, in the past few years that I have released and have been working on that are, about something. And so that's like one. I in the beginning, I was more of a, like, much like Seinfeld before me. I was like writing comedy about nothing, or it was anywhere between nothing and something. I was like, it's something, right? There's actually Seinfeld has a book called Is This Anything? And it's just like a collection of all of his jokes, like decade by decade, because like, is this anything is the thing that a comedian might say to another comedian friend about a bit, a premise idea. You're like, is this anything? And then I also like that Gilda Radner, I believe, wrote a book called It's Always Something. So, asked and answered. And so this hour sort of started, like many of my hours begin, it sort of starts with like one seed, that gets planted, or a couple seeds that get watered, or one snowflake that then gets, compounded with some other snowflakes, and then starts rolling down a hill and becomes a gigantic boulder and an avalanche, and like little, snowman Indiana Jones is running out of the way. And eventually it becomes a massive, ice sculpture that we carve into the beautiful shape that we want it to be, all from one seed that was planted. Wow, it became winter all of a sudden. And so this one, Rini and I started our relationship together in 2016. And I was, I think that year I recorded an album that I've been working on for a couple years about not wanting children, called No Kidding, that was formed from a similar, seed that had been planted in a relationship several years earlier, where it was like I'm like, I finally started talking about things that were going on in my life, like, how do you do comedy? Well, you do anything for 10 years. And then after 10 years, you can be like, oh, I can do anything. So what do I want to do? What is it that I want to talk about? And at that time, it was, talking about not wanting children. That was an important thing in my life, in that relationship. And so a lot of comedy grew out of that. And then when Rini and I got together, I was working on the album, on the hour that would become AKA All Killing Aside, which I probably came on the show and talked about 5 years ago when it came out. But So for the first few years of our relationship, Rini and I were, she's always been, she's not a practicing comedian. She does not perform comedy herself. She has other artistic manifestations that, arise in her life that she leans into. But also she is funny. She is wise. She is kind. She knows me. And because of our spending as much time together and as much time around comedy, and her seeing my comedy and engaging with it, when we went to the Edinburgh Fringe Fest in 2018, that was the first time that she really started watching. We were there for a month almost, and she came to almost every show and watched the same show night after night and took notes. I don't know if that's when she started taking notes, like, officially, but now sometimes she's at a show. If I'm doing a headlining weekend at a club, she'll come to as many of the shows as she wants to. She'll have a notebook and she'll take notes. And like the next day, she'll let me know of like, oh, you said this new thing and I liked it, or you said this one differently and I like this way, or why do you think this way instead of that way, or this joke is funny, but could it make more sense? I love that she said once, and I jotted it down. She said, "I don't think I could be a comedian because I want jokes to make sense." And
Mm.
so that is a valuable perspective to have in the mix. And I really do feel that, in the almost decade since we've been together, my comedy has veered even more, truthful words, not that
Mhm.
I've always wanted people to know the truth. I've never wanted to, I think there's wonderful, beautiful comedy out there that where you don't like. I mean, certainly there are people playing characters or people doing satire. Like when Sarah Silverman's early material, like if you read it on paper, you'd be like, a racist could say this, but she says it, and you're like, oh, this is clearly a kind-hearted person like lampooning racism. And there's that. And so I feel like, a satirist would hopefully always want you to know, like, what is the truth? What is the perspective, even if it's not the literal text. And I know that there's some comedy today, some comedy that I love, like Nathan Fielder, for an example, like where part of it is like when I watch The Rehearsal, I think it's a magnificent work of art. I think it's beautiful. I think it's hilarious. I think it's human, and there is some authenticity to it. And also, if you ask me, what in any moment is that real? Is that real? What does he really think and believe? I truly don't always know, and that is fine. I mean, that is a part of it. I mean, it's not even like it's even farther than like Sacha Baron Cohen, who I think once said that Nathan Fielder is like carrying on in like his lineage. Where Sacha Baron Cohen, you watch Borat and you're like, okay, I know. I think I know what Sacha Baron Cohen thinks and believes here more than I know what Nathan Fielder does. But for me, I always want people to know. But in the past, I would be more likely to say something that was, I'm like, people will know that this is ironic. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But now, in part, thanks to Rini's influence, like we want the audience to know like what is true, even if in a particular joke, I might be presenting a point of view that is not, might not be literally what I think, but I'm like, I always want the audience to know. And very often I'll explicitly tell them. So structurally speaking, I would say that the work of creating Rini began even before like the idea for it existed in like the format of Rini and myself collaborating on my comedy, which often would be her listening to what I was doing on stage versus and then offering some input and eventually another way that it goes sometimes is and I try not to have it be exactly this way now, but there was many times in the past where Rini would share an idea with me and I would either take it in, not take it in, respond, not respond, but eventually like a few hours later, a few weeks later, I would be like, I've got an idea, and not remembering that it was the exact thing that she had shared with me previously. I think that we have both gotten I've gotten better at listening, and Rini has gotten better at advocating for her positions when she strongly believes that something is a good point or a funny idea, as opposed to her saying something, me not necessarily totally responding enthusiastically because maybe I didn't hear it entirely, maybe I was focused on something else and I wasn't, whatever the case might be. But initially, Rini might have thought, I thought it was a good idea, but oh well, I guess maybe not. But then, days, weeks, or however long later, she's like, hey, that's the thing. That's the thing I said. And so now, even more, I feel like I'm very glad that she knows when she's like, hey, this one's good. Listen to this one. And I'll be like, I will listen to this one. And so I feel like for the Rini special specifically, like when it became, I guess it probably started to come, like I recorded AKA in 2019. So it was somewhere in that around then, give or take a year, maybe even like a little bit the year before, because there's often an overlap in like, I don't just work on 1 hour at a time and then get rid of it and then start the next one from scratch. There's always like, they're kind of staggered. So like right now, I recorded the Rini hour a year ago, and all through like the past couple years, there was, my grandmother died in 2020. So I've been working on the grandmother hour in some form since then, in in tandem. And then I've been working on this other hour about masculinity around for at least that much time as well. So, and then I have a new hour that I've conceived of recently that's only in like the very beginning stages. But that I think will be like, the third one down the line,
Wow.
if things go according to this plan. But so at some point, 2019-ish, I was I it we decided, and like I think the next hour will be about our relationship, or at least I had some material that was about it. I was like, oh, at least I'll be, because it's my life, because we've been together since 2016, living together since 2017, collaborating creatively together since at least 2018. And so 2019, there we are. And like the material starts to arise, not only with Rini, but also about Rini, about our life. And I do think that, yes, like you alluded or explicitly stated, there's, a long lineage in comedy of like, literally, Henny Youngman, take my wife, please. The idea that, a male stand-up comedian who is married, like, doesn't like his wife. She nags. She won't sleep with him. She spends all of his money, whatever, there's so many tropes that have been, that are still perpetuated because there's certainly a market for it. But I'm also very glad that there are comedians who are celebrating their relationships and marriages. Like Josh Gondelman, I think, is a wonderful example of somebody who like has brought up, he has some new jokes about his mother-in-law, and he's like, and I like her, and so that's the vibe there. I think Gary Goldman has talked very positively about his wife. Even I feel like, Bill Burr, I think, talks about his wife and their arguments sometimes, but also I think there's usually a spirit of like, it's clear that he loves his wife and wants and cares about his family. And so I do think that, there's so many more comedians today than there ever have been. And there is this, obviously, there is still sexism, there is still misogyny, there is still patriarchy. And so there are still, artists of all kinds, and certainly stand-up comedians who will be like, my wife, right? And I'm happy to be who I am and, have the relationship that I do. And I am the person that I am in large part, because of, being in a relationship with Rini and, talking about the things that we do and the things that we share and value, and like reading specific things and engaging with specific, art and lessons and spirituality and, whatever, all of the things that are a part of our life, that are part of our life, are part of my life. And so I feel like my life, right? And so it's kind of, I remember, do you know the comedian Chris Gethard?
I don't think I do.
You got a lot
much.
of a great syllabus ahead of you. Chris Gethard is a really, kind, thoughtful guy who also loves his wife, loves his child, and he's like a really like honest storyteller. Like his comedy is all real life, right out of his life. And I remember a friend of mine who's a musician asked him once, they saw him do a show with me, and they said, Chris, like, why do you only like tell, autobiographical stories? Why don't you ever, like, why is that your thing? He's like, I think he said, he's like, I don't know how to do anything else. He's like, I can't make stuff up. I can only dig into what's in here and share it. And that resonated with me a lot. I'm like, I can make stuff up. And like, I have, again, like I said, some absurd, some things that aren't necessarily like just right out of some things that are just like, oh, little joke equations that I thought of, or things about paradoxes that I find interesting, or riddles or what have you. But I think the richest mine to the richest ore that I can mine is like the depth of my affection and love and gratitude and the communion, the togetherness that exists. And I'm like, as long as it's here, I'm gonna keep digging into it. Like, and especially because I'm a different person now than I was 9 years ago when we met, and Rini's a different person now. And we continue to to grow and change. And like the way that I used to think about monogamy before I met Rini was like, man, it seems like I feel like the classic, the party line, the party anti-monogamy line for many, at least for myself earlier, was like, sounds boring. One person forever. And I talk about this a little in the special, of course, but like the real truth of it is that it's never like, do you know this thing? They say it's kind of like an old Buddhist thing or an old Greek philosophical thing as well. It's that the same person cannot step into the same river twice, because the river is not, it's never the same water. Like as the water's rushing by, like, that river wasn't there maybe thousands of years ago. It won't be here in thousands of years. For now, the Nile is the Nile, the Amazon is the Amazon. Like every river is, you're like, yeah, that's that river. But land masses shift, and not even that, just day to day, moment to moment, the same, like what is the water is not the same, right? And the same thing for us. Our molecules are not the same. Our cells, our atoms are not the same. And so there is no such thing as the same person stepping into the same river. And so there is kind of no such thing as being with one person forever, because you are not the same one person and they are not the same one person. You get to, twist and like, a double helix of like two rivers, like flowing together, or like both of us, hurtling through the life of this river, as these also, ever shifting rivers. And so it's really cool to obviously have our own individual experiences and share them with each other and get to interact, and pinball, bounce off of each other, those things. And then we have our life together. Sometimes we have adventures together, and sometimes we have separate ones, and we come back and reunite. But like, yeah, I mean, that is from where this comedy special, originated, just in the joy of being together, the joy of loving Rini. And in part, I guess, because there's not as much of this out there. I'm not saying I'm not the only comedian. I have not innovated celebrating love. I mean, there's a lot of songs out there, but I do think also, especially in comedy where those joke tropes exist and where people believe that, comedy must have a target, and I mean, there are some jokes in the special that have targets of like, the kind of dumb guy that I used to be that maybe still exists out there in the world. But basically I'm doing my best to, you mentioned call out culture earlier, and, you've heard of, I imagine, calling in as well, as opposed to being
Yes,
like,
I have.
yeah,
Something I
we
found.
got one. Yeah. I called you in to call in. Now, Nick, of course, as you know, we don't always talk about calling out anymore. We love to talk about calling in, because truly, and you may have heard me say this on a podcast, Jacqueline Novak and Chris Laker, two comedian friends of mine who were actually in Edinburgh with me in 2023. And I think, in 2018, the first time I was there, 2018. And I believe that's when they told me this thing, that whenever they speak negatively about someone else, they will add "just like me" at the end. Like, so they'll say like, man, look at that selfish asshole over there, just like me, or just like us. Because, Rini shared with me once long ago, I don't know from whence this came, but the idea of we see the world not as it is, but as we are. For us to see something in someone else, like in order for us to see it, there must be something of it present in ourselves. And it doesn't mean I love this. And maybe you've heard me say this, maybe you haven't, maybe you heard it from its original. Elmore Leonard, who wrote, crime novels and came up with a character that was in the lead of the show Justified, is Timothy Oliphant, plays this guy Raylan Givens, and he's a U.S. Marshal. And he says this thing in one episode. He says, which maybe comes from one of the books that this guy wrote. And the thing he says, if you meet an asshole in the morning, you met one asshole. Meet assholes all day, you're the asshole. So it's always good for us to interrogate, ourself and our motives if we see something out there. They say if you see something, say something. But I say if you see something, like, think something first, and then think about it. And then if you want to say something, then go ahead and say something. But yeah, I do think that there are, because there's a lot of comedy and a lot of, messaging in society that heads in one direction towards, men and women are like this, husbands and wives, in a heteronormative structure are like this. And here I am, Rini and me, we're heteronormative. We're a man and a woman in a relationship together, but not like that. And so I think that I love that it gets to be, a celebration of our joy, of our love, and because it's not explicitly designed to be in opposition to those other like it's just we're not that. That is not what we are, and so by happenstance, we also get to be subversive and unique. So. Everyone should try to be subversive and unique. Don't can't do it. I'm gonna be subversive and unique, just like everyone else.
We should start wrapping up. I did want to, say I would definitely take the note that it's funny, but it needs to make more sense because my notes are often it's not funny and it doesn't make sense. So you're closer than I am. But I would be remiss of me not to pass on a question from Katie, given the your special. So I watched it with my partner Katie, who also enjoyed it, and she particularly enjoyed. Well, I guess I should say this is a very important possible factual error in your special on a very important topic of Super Mario Brothers. Katie was questioning the line and your chance to defend yourself against this very important accusation. But one of the lines was that they're sick of fighting dragons in Super Mario Brothers. And she was wondering, who are the dragons in Super Mario Brothers?
Oh, I guess I thought that King Koopa is a dragon. Is he
Okay.
is a Koopa not a dragon?
I wonder if
let me see.
Hey, Katie. No, I don't think she's available at the moment. No, she's working today. You couldn't join us, but she thought you were talking about Bowser, and she claimed Bowser was not a dragon because he doesn't have wings.
Oh wait, and absolutely. Hold on, because I just searched Koopa King Dragon, and it came up. Okay, great. So here is the Wikipedia page that comes up. It says Bowser, also known as King Bowser or King Koopa, is a fictional character. So we're talking about Bowser, the same person. And he is the arch nemesis of the plumber Mario, the leader of the turtle-like Koopa race. And it says he is depicted as a fire-breathing monster with a tyrannical personality.
Let's see. That's the fire breathing is the dragon-like in the realm of a dragon.
Yes. When I search on the page, let's see, on this Wikipedia page, I searched for the word dragon. It appears 3 times. It says Bowser is also a dark attribute character who appears as the main opponent in Puzzles and Dragons, Super Mario Brothers Edition, which I think doesn't, guarantee that he's at least it. The fact that she thought, she's like, you can't be talking about Bowser because he doesn't have wings and dragons must have wings. I mean, now
if
we're
they're
going
a real
to get,
dragon. It's not a fake one. Yeah.
But that's a great, I mean, that is indeed the creature that we're talking about. And I guess is he more turtle than dragon? I feel like he's like somewhere between turtle and dragon. I'm actually going to say I'm going to just ask, is Bowser a dragon? Or, it said, okay, the AI overview, which, let's trust that completely. It says Bowser is best described as a Koopa, which is a turtle-like species, but has been influenced by both dragon and ox elements. His fire-breathing and spiky appearance give him dragon-like qualities, which can make him seem like a hybrid of the two. And his resemblance to a Chinese dragon turtle has also been noted. And I didn't know that was a thing, but that's probably what he mostly is. A dragon. Oh, wow. A dragon turtle is a legendary creature that combines 2 of the 4 celestial animals of Chinese mythology, the shell of a turtle with the dragon's body. So I think I would say
I think you've
Yeah.
defended yourself well. Yes.
I'll also say that I really like that you opened, because I know you told me in advance that you were going to share a question from Katie, and that in this very conversation you said you would be remiss if you did not, and that's really fun. If you put re colon miss, that's what this whole section is about. Both, you are like, this is about the miss in my life, Katie, and Rini is the miss in my life. So we are both remiss in the good way.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining me. I did maybe just give you a final chance. Yeah, I think if yeah, people listen to our show, it's not a one-to-one. Comedy is unique, but I feel like it's in the spirit of the kind of ideas shared on our show. I think most of our listeners, yeah, will enjoy the special. So hopefully we point a few people towards it. But I'll just give you a final chance when it's out, where people can get it, all those kind of things. I mean, strongly encourage listeners to check it out. I think you enjoy it.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much. So, Rini, the special debuts on YouTube, which is a website. And I know we have it over here in America. And so it's on YouTube starting in New York City time on November 19th at 8 p.m., which I believe in your Australian time zone will be the next day at noon. So in Australia, in the
parts of Australia, different time zones, but yeah,
yes,
in the main part, yeah, yeah,
in the main Australian time zone, noon on November 20th, or I'll certainly say 8 p.m. Eastern Time, United States, on November 19th. On my YouTube, it'll be a collaboration with the producers they're called Blonde Medicine. So if you go to Blonde Medicine's YouTube page or mine, you can subscribe to both. You can go, if it's before that right now, you can go and get notified, and it'll tell you when it's happening. And especially if you can watch when it comes out, it's helpful for the algorithm, but otherwise it should be on YouTube for as forever as YouTube is. And then you can find me, Myq Kaplan, spelled the weird way I spell it, on social media, on my Substack, and all the places that you might think to search for a comedian by putting my name in there. But yeah, if you only remember one thing, congratulations. Some people don't even remember anything. The Special Rini YouTube on November 19th or 20th, depending where you are.
All right. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us. Well done on the special. And I think our Australian listeners, obviously we're an Australian podcast, but yeah, a lot of Australians I think will really appreciate your Australian accent. I think you really nailed it. So I think that's something to look forward to as well.
Thank you so much. That was a beautiful button. Thank you, Nick.